So I'll just do a recap, and by the time I think more people will join. All right. So in the last class, we started talking about hydrogen atom, and what we did was we defined what is the Hamiltonian for the hydrogen, for the electron, right, in the hydrogen atom. And for that Hamiltonian, uh, we were able to, using that Hamiltonian and then using the Schrodinger equation, we were able to get the wave function and energy levels. Okay, so the hydrogen atom system had one electron, one proton, and this was the Coulomb's potential that the electron feels because of the presence of the proton, right? Now you don't have to remember, the constants and everything, but the important point is that this potential varies as inversely proportional to r. Okay, so it varies as 1 by r. Okay, that is the important point here. And we added this potential into our Hamiltonian, right? And our Hamiltonian was initially written in terms of Cartesian coordinates. So the first thing that we did was to convert the Cartesian coordinates to spherical coordinates, right? Because this one also, the potential also varied as 1 by r. So there is a kind of radial symmetry. So it would be easier to deal with the Hamiltonian in terms of spherical coordinates. That is the first step that we did. And after that, we used the separation of variables, right? So we assume that psi is a product of two functions. One function is a function of only the radial variable r, and the other function is an angular function, which is a function of theta and phi. So we were able to get these two different, right? These two different equations, and then we proceeded to solve it. And then even for the second equation, we again assume that there is a separation of variable, and then we got two equations, one in terms of theta and one in terms of phi. So essentially, we were able to break down the wave function and the Schrodinger equation into three different equations, and then we were able to solve it. Okay, so finally, what was the solution that we get? So finally, we got some complicated big equation. Let me go to that. So of course, we got energy along the way. So energy of the nth level is given by this constant divided by n square. Okay, and obviously because there has to be a finite energy even at at the lowest energy level. So for the 0 point energy, n is equal to 1. Okay, so that is our energy that we got along the way, and we also got the wave function. Okay, so the wave function is this particular quantity. It's a complicated function, but if we know what is the L value, N value, M value, we can break it down to simpler functions. All right. So we stopped here in the previous class. So now I'm going to continue from this point on. Okay, good. So can all of you, before I proceed further, I was hoping that you are able to see my screen. So are you able to see my screen? Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. All right. So now let's go on to what do we mean? I mean, we got some like complicated function as the wave function, but I mean, we have not really intuitively seen what all of these mean, right? So that is the next step that we are going to do. And obviously, like you already know, in quantum mechanics, the wave function itself has no meaning, right? The meaning comes from the psi square term, right? Psi square represents the probability that an electron or the particle is present in that particular region, right? So the probability, which is the norm of psi, so that is the main quantity that is of value. Just psi is not really of that much value. It doesn't tell us much. But psi square is something which we need to consider. All right, so now let's move on to this. So we got this psi and lm, and this could be written in terms of some a. I'm considering a as the normalization constant, right, which is basically all of this part, all the constants put together. So there is some normalization constant. Then there is the radial part and the angular part. Angular part can further be divided into or can be broken down into the theta part and the phi part. Okay. So in this NLM, so N, L, and M, all of these are quantum numbers, right? Because they are discrete. Okay, it is NLM cannot have like decimal numbers or fractional numbers. They have to be discrete quantities, and so these are quantum numbers. Okay, and so N can vary from 1, 2, 3, etc. L can only go from 0 up to N minus 1, right? That's what I've written here. And M can go from minus L to plus L. Okay. So there are N minus, so there are N different values of L, and there can be total 2L plus 1 values of M for every value of L. Okay. So these are the two. So this, I think this we already know, like right from I think 11th or 12th standard, we have been learning this, right? What is N, L, M? These are quantum numbers, and these represent the energy levels and then the orbitals, right? This we have been learning, but now you know where it comes from. Okay, that was the important point of learning quantum mechanics, because now you exactly know where this N, L, and M is coming from. Okay, so now let us look at the different states. So for the first state, this is the lowest energy state, right? So the lowest energy state has N equal to 1. L can only go from 0 to N minus 1. So basically, it just means that L is 0. And M can go from minus L to plus L. So here M is only 0. Okay, so this is the first state. And in the first state, there is like some normalization constant. And now you have, it is multiplied with e power minus r by a. And the theta part and the phi part both are 1. Okay. All right. So we will see what we want to do with this. But I wanted to write down this table because then we'll keep referring to this table and then proceed with our calculation or with our intuition, whatever that it is that we are trying to learn. Okay. So now you can see that the wave function for the n equal to 1 state is a simple exponential, right? There is no other term. This is just a simple exponential. Okay. N equal to 2, the n equal to 2 energy level, right? It has how many states? How many degenerate states do you see here? Can anyone tell me for n equal to 2? Please look at this table and tell me how many degenerate states that you see for n equal to 2. Please write in the chats. Come on. Okay, Rahul has said 3. Any other answer? Raveen is saying 4. Okay, what do you think is the correct answer? Now, if you just look at these 3 lines, you will think that there are 3, but no, actually there are 4. Okay, so Praveen, you are right. So there are 4, right? So basically, L equal to 0, M equal to 0, L equal to 1, M equal to 0, L equal to 1, M equal to 1, and L equal to 1, M equal to minus 1. Okay, so there are 4 degenerate states, okay, for N equal to 2. For N equal to 1, how many degenerate states? Just 1. Basically, there is no other state. So there's just 1 state. For N equal to 2, you can see 4 states. What about N equal to 3? N equal to 3, can someone please count and tell me how many states you will see? Come on, do the computation and write it in chats. How many states can you see for N equal to 3? Okay, for the third energy level. How many degenerate states? Do a count and let me know. Right? So this I'm showing you, L can go from 0 to N minus 1, M can go from minus L to plus L. So do this count and let me know for N equal to 3, how many you will see. Rahul, you have guessed 9. Yes, absolutely. Rahul, you are correct. Shubhadeep, also you are correct. Okay, oh, many of you have guessed 9. Priya, okay. So Praveen, this time you are wrong. Okay, I think there was some counting mistake, right? So let's look at it. All right. So n equal to 3, L0, M0, L1, M0, L1, plus or minus 1. So this turns out to be 4. L2, M0, so this is 5. L2, M plus or minus 1, so this is 7. L2, M plus or minus 2, this is 9. So there is a pattern here which you might have noticed now. For n equal to 1, there is one degenerate state. For n equal to 2, there are 4. And for n equal to 3, there are 9. So basically the pattern is pretty clear. So the number of degenerate states that you get is equal to n square. Okay. So now you know that degeneracy of each n level is basically n square. Okay, so that is the pattern that you can see here. And you can also count, you can, mathematically prove by doing a summation, you will get n square. Okay, I think this proof is there in the book and you can do it intuitively also. All right. So now let's see. So in this second energy level, for L equal to 0, M equal to 0, again there is no theta term and phi term. And for L equal to 1, M equal to 0, there is a theta term, which is cos theta, no phi term. This is just 1. And for L equal to 1, M equal to plus or minus 1, and N equal to 2, there is this term and theta term and as well as a phi term. Okay. Uh, Phi term always goes as e power im phi, right? This we have already seen when we are solving. So that's why you will always know whether or not there will be a phi. If m is 0, then obviously e power im phi turns out to be 1. And if m is not equal to 0, then it will be e power. So for the case of m equal to 1, you're getting e power plus I phi. For m equal to minus 1, you will get e power minus I phi. Okay, similarly for this case also, right? These are the things that you will get. All right. So you don't have to memorize this table or anything, but we will refer to this table and see what we can do with it. Okay. So this is our table. And now, okay, these are some of the points that come out from this table, right? So for any particular value of n and l, r and l of r is same irrespective of what m is, correct? Is that right? So if l equal to right. So for a particular value of n and l, okay, so for n equal to 2, l equal to 1, m is 0, n equal to 2, l equal to 1, m is plus or minus 1. These two r and l of r are same, right? Because this does not really depend on m, it only depends on l. Similarly, you can see the same thing here as well, right? When l is 1, L is 1, right? In these three degenerate states, this R and L of R, right? This radial wave function is exactly the same. Similarly, when L equal to 2, right? And M is 0 plus or minus 1 plus or minus 2, then these things are exactly the same. The normalization constants might vary, but the radial part of the wave function is exactly the same. So that is the first observation that we can make from these wave functions. Okay. And n is the principal quantum number. Okay. So n, like now you can recall from what you learned in your 11th or 12th standard, right? From since then you have been learning that n is the principal quantum number. Basically, this just represents your energy level. Okay. So energy of a hydrogen atom depends on what value of L or what value of n it has. Okay, that is the energy level that it is in. Okay, and energy of that level is given by minus 13.6 electron volt. This is the constant, right? All of these constants together turn out to be minus 13.6 electron volt divided by n square. Okay. Now your L is the angular quantum number. It goes from 0 to n minus 1. This we have already seen. And angular momentum of the electron about the proton is determined by L. Okay. Basically, if you want to calculate what is the angular momentum of an electron about the proton in the hydrogen atom, This will be given by h cross into root of L into L plus 1. Okay, so this is your angular momentum formula. So only thing that you need for angular momentum, if someone asks you what is the angular momentum of the electron, because it's moving in circles around the proton, right? So what is the angular momentum of the electron? In that case, only information that you need is the value of L. Once you know the value of L, you can easily tell what is the angular momentum of the electron. Okay, so initially, of course, you have heard about s, p, d, and f orbitals. So this s, p, d, and f comes from historical names. Okay, so people initially were looking at the sodium spectra. So sodium atom goes as what? It goes as 1s2, 2s2, 2p6, and then 3s1. That's right, right? So it has 11 electrons, and that is how they will be arranged in. So people could see S, P, D, and F, maybe not F in sodium, but or maybe if there is some transition from lower energy to higher energy level, people could see the spectra in the F level as well. Okay, so these names, right, S orbital, P, D, and F, this comes from some historical, at that point in time, people were looking at the spectra and they called S orbital short form for sharp, and P was short form for principal, D was short form for diffuse, and F was short form for fundamental. Okay, so this was what was happening. I hope I'm still online. Okay. Shubhati, did you write something? It is basically going as AP.
Yeah, the yes, ma'am. The pattern in the table. So
Uh-huh.
as we can calculate the sum over all the APs, like when L is equal to 0, M is possible value 1, and when
Yes,
L is
yes. That's what you have to do. You have to calculate, you have to go over all the possible values of M, and the number of degenerate states for every L value is 2L plus 1, right? So
yes,
basically,
ma'am.
you have to sum over 2L plus 1 from M equal to, uh, right, 0 to L minus 1.
Yeah.
Okay,
So it
so
is
that's
going
what,
as AP.
yeah, yeah. Okay. All right. So these were like historical names, and that's why we ended up calling L equal to 0 as L, S orbital, L equal to 1 as P orbital, L equal to 2 as D, and L equal to 3 as F orbital. Okay, so this, I think, this we have already seen. Now the third quantum number is the M. Okay, M is the magnetic quantum number, and it goes from, right, minus L to plus L. Okay, so there are total 2L plus 1 M numbers for every value of L. Okay, so this also refers to the angular momentum. So basically what this M value will tell us, this M value tells us the Z component of the angular momentum. Okay, so Lz is nothing but your mh cross. So if you want to know what is the Z component of the angular momentum, all you need to know is the value of M, and with that you can determine what is the Z component of angular momentum, okay, which is m into h cross. All right. Uh, okay, so m is the magnetic quantum number because the energy of a hydrogen atom in a magnetic field depends on m. Okay, so why this happens is basically if there is no magnetic field, let's take an example. Let's say L is equal to 1. In that case, M will have three values, three possible values. One is minus 1, 0, and plus 1. Okay. If there is no magnetic field, if the hydrogen atom is not experiencing any magnetic field, in that case, all these three M values, right, all these three states, right, will be at the same energy level. But if the hydrogen atom experiences a magnetic field, then these three states will split and become non-degenerate. Okay, so the magnetic field basically changes the degeneracy of these M levels. Okay, all right. So in the absence of magnetic field, there is a 2L plus 1 fold degeneracy. And this degeneracy splits into 2L plus 1 different energy levels in the presence of a magnetic field. So this is what I've drawn here. Suppose this is the 2p orbital level. Okay, so 2p means this is n equal to 2, p means L is equal to 1. So if L is equal to 1, then M can take three values, -1, 0, and 1. So if there is no magnetic field, all these three M values, these three states would be at the same energy level. But if there is a magnetic field, they split into three different energy levels. Okay, and so M equal to +1 will be at the highest level, then M equal to 0, and then M equal to -1. Okay, so this splitting of energy levels under the presence of magnetic field is known as the Zeeman effect. Okay, so we'll talk about this again, but right now I'm just mentioning the name here. Okay, this kind of splitting of energy levels under the magnetic field is known as the Zeeman effect. Okay, so now what is the next thing that we want to see? All right. So now what we want to do is we want to plot the different wave functions and the different probabilities, right? That is the important part that we always do for after solving any of the problems that we have done so far. We always plot the wave function as well as the probability, right? So the same thing we will do here also. Okay, so psi n l m. Okay, this wave function depends on r, theta, and phi. Okay, these are the three variables. But we can split it into two parts. One is the radial part and the angular part. Okay, so the radial part will only be a function of r, which is the radial variable. Okay, um, so let's look at what is the lowest energy level. Lowest energy level is R1s, right? S means that L is 0 and 1 means that N is equal to 1. Okay, so R10 of R is proportional to e power minus R by A. So this is an exponential function. Okay, and now if you want to normalize this function, what you have to do is, because this is a normalization in spherical coordinates, you will have to multiply it with R square, and then like any other normalization, you take the square of the wave function. So here also you are taking square of the wave function and then integrating over all dr, okay, from 0 to infinity. Okay, only difference here is you are multiplying it with r square because this is a spherical coordinate type, because this integration is in spherical coordinates. So you have to multiply it with r square. If you're doing the normalization of the angular part, then you have to multiply it with the sine theta, right? Okay. All right. So now this is your normalization. So essentially what the integrand, everything inside the integral, this means this represents the probability that electron lies between r and r plus dr, right? This term essentially means that this is the probability that the electron lies between r and r plus dr. So if you just look at this term without the dr, then that represents the probability density that electron lies between r and r plus dr. If this is the probability, then this is just the probability density. Okay, that is the difference. This we have already seen, but this is in the context of hydrogen atom. All right. So we'll plot both the things. We'll plot both the radial wave function as well as the probability. Okay, and then we'll see how they look like. All right. So the first thing, the first energy, lowest energy level is n equal to 1, L equal to 0. So R10 of R is an exponential function, right? So obviously exponential function goes in this manner. Okay, we are plotting it in terms of R by A because R by A is a natural norm, right? What do you call scaling that is already present in the formula. So we are plotting it versus R by A. Okay, so if you look at the wave function, it goes as just like any other exponential function. Okay, and if you now look at the probability, because there is an r square into e power minus 2r by a, you know where this minus 2 comes from, right? Because you're squaring the wave function. You're squaring this, so you will get e power minus 2r by a, and then you're multiplying it by r square, right? So this is your probability or probability density. So now you're plotting probability density versus r by a. So now you can see that for small r, right, you have to increase, you have to go higher, because this exponential function will be high for small r and it is multiplied with r square, right? So for small r, it is going to go up, and then as r increases further and further, the exponential part will just take over, right? And then it will go down. Okay, it will decay. All right, so this is your probability density, and this is your wave function. Now you can see from these graphs that it never goes to zero, right? This point here, the origin here is zero. It never goes, right? On the y-axis, it never crosses zero, right? Which means there are no nodes. Okay, node is, I hope by now you know what a node means. Node means that at that point, the probability of finding the electron is zero, right? So, but in both these cases, there are no nodes, so you are not going to get any 0 point while the plot is still decaying, right? So that does not happen. Okay. Now let's look at r n equal to 2, l equal to 0. Okay, and then for the radial part, r20 of r is proportional to 2 minus r by a into e power minus r by 2a. Okay, so now you can see already in this function 2 minus r by a, that means this function will go to 0, right? This wave function will become 0 when r by a is equal to 2, right? That you can already see from this function. Okay, so there is going to be one node at least. Okay, and similarly for the P20 of R as well, there is going to be one node because R by A, because this function will become 0 when R by A is equal to 2. Okay, when R by A equal to 2, then this term will become 0, and so this entire function will become 0. So there is going to be one node. Okay, and that's what we find when we plot it. So when we plot it, so if you plot R20 of R versus R by A, you will see that it crosses this x equal to 0 line. Okay, it crosses this line. So at this point, right, y is 0. Okay, sorry, this is the y equal to 0 line. So at this point, y is 0. And so there is a node here. Okay, and then there are no nodes. Similarly, at the same point, you will get a node here. So there is an increase in probability, then decrease, then it touches 0. And then again, there is an increase and decrease. Okay, so this is how the probability looks like. So there is going to be one node in this case. Okay. Now, if you look at n equal to 2, l equal to 1, and 2p. So here again, you will not see any node. Okay, because r21 of r, the only place where this function will be 0 will be at r equal to 0. Okay, so starting of the wave function is not really called a node. In the middle, if there is some 0 point, that is called a node. Okay, so there is no node here, and similarly, there is no node here as well. Okay, so that's what we have plotted here. So R21 of R goes as this, and the probability density for R21 of R also goes as in a similar manner. Okay, so again, there are no nodes. So again, there is a pattern that you can, decipher from these plots and these wave functions. That is, the number of nodes that you will get is equal to n minus L minus 1. Okay, and that you can verify. So if n, so here in this example, n is 2, L is 1, right? So 2 minus 1 minus 1, so 2 minus 2 is 0. So here in this case, there are 0 nodes. Let's check here. Here n is 2, L is 0. So n minus L minus 1. So 2 minus 1 will give you one node. And that is what you get. You get one node here. Okay. So the homework for you is that I want you to plot, right? I've only plotted for n equal to 1 and n equal to 2. So you should also go back and check how the plots look like for n equal to 3. Okay. Please do that. All right, because this might be asked in your quiz or in the end sem exam. Okay, so n equal to 3 also go and look at how the wave function and the probability density looks like. Okay, so that is your homework here. I've also listed it here. All right, so that we have already seen now that for 1s there are 0 nodes, for 2s again there's one node, and for 2p there are 0 nodes. So from the next plots, 3s, 3p, 3d, you can figure out whether there will be one node, 0 node, 2 node, like how many nodes will there be, okay, for the n equal to 3 case. All right. So now, and this is also another homework problem. You need to find the expectation value of R. That is, right, this particular quantity you need to find in the 2s state. So for the 2s state, you have to go back and look at the wave function, right? The wave function is given for you over here, right? 2s means this is the wave function. Okay, so with this wave function, using this wave function, you have to find the expectation value. Okay, so that is as simple as that. All right. Okay. All right. Oops, sorry. So this is the radial part of the wave function. We have still not looked at the angular part. So we have to do that as well. Okay. Now, if you look at the radial part of the wave function, okay, and if you draw a cloud of electrons, okay, because the probability density means wherever you have the probability of finding the electron. So if you draw like points wherever you have finite probability of finding the electron, over there, if you put just points, you will get a cloud of electron for 1s orbital. So there will be a cloud which will disperse and which will become thinner and thinner as you go away from the center of this cloud. Okay, that is what is going to happen. For 2s orbital, there will be one node. So there will be an empty space in between and there will be two clouds. So one cloud in the middle, okay, and this represents your cloud of electron, right? And then there will be a node and then the second cloud. Okay, so if you draw the probability, just like if you take, let's say you are a drone from above and you're watching the cloud of electrons, or you're watching the probability that the electron lies somewhere in space for the hydrogen atom, then this is what you will see from above. Okay, you'll see that there is a cloud of electron here, then there is empty space, and then there is another cloud of electron for the 2s orbital, because 2s orbital has a node. And that same thing is represented here as well. So there is an increase in the probability, then it becomes 0, and then again there is a further increase in probability. Okay, same thing can be represented in terms of radial distance in this manner. Okay, similarly you can see for 2p p orbital, d orbital as well. Okay, so essentially probability density of electron is uniform in the angular direction, right? Because for 2s orbital, the theta and phi part are also 1. So those also don't contribute. So there is uniformity in the angular direction. And in the radial direction, there is one node. Okay, so there is one area, one empty space, and then there is the second part. Okay, second cloud. All right. Now n equal to 2, L equal to 1. So this is your 2p orbital. Okay. In your 2p orbital, if you look at the wave function, this is what it is proportional to. Your full wave function, if you look at it, you have r by a into e power minus r by 2a into cos theta. Now r into cos theta is your z, right? If you convert this to Cartesian coordinates, back to Cartesian coordinates, you know that r cos theta is basically your z, right? And e power minus r by 2a, anyway, r you can write it as root over x square plus y square plus z square. So this is your z, which means that if you now plot, if you take the square of this function, which will give you the probability, right? In that case, and now if you plot that probability, you will see that it lies along the z-axis. The cloud of electrons will lie along the z-axis. So this represents your pz orbital. Okay, because here r cos theta equal to z, you are already getting. So this will lie along the z-axis. Okay. Any questions up to this point? Please let me know if you have any questions or anything. Okay. All right. So here, just by looking at the wave function that we got, we can say that this represents the pz orbital. So m equal to 0 case represents the pz orbital. Now we have to see what is the px and py orbital, right? This is pz orbital is something that we already learned in our 11th or 12th standard, right? The first time that we learned about orbitals, we already learned that this is how the pz orbital looks like. And now you are actually seeing where it comes from. Why does it have this shape? Okay. Now let's look at n equal to 2, L equal to 1, m equal to 1. So if you look at this function, then psi 2, 1, 1 is proportional to r by a into e power minus r by 2a into sine theta into e power plus I phi. Okay, so this can be written as r21 of r into y11 of theta comma phi. And n equal to 2, L equal to 1, m equal to minus 1 will have e power minus I phi. Everything else remains the same, right? You see everything else remains the same. Only difference is it has e power minus I phi. Okay, so essentially if you take the probabilities of these functions, right, meaning if you square these functions and multiply it with r square, both of these functions will be the same, right? Because if you take the square of these functions, you have to multiply it with its complex conjugate, right? So e power plus I phi will be multiplied with e power minus I phi. There is no other complex term here. So these two will get cancelled, and all you'll be left with will be the square of this term. Okay, so this will be your probability. So if you now calculate probabilities, they will have same probability. So we are keeping the r part aside because they are exactly the same. And let us see what happens if you take the square of the y part, the angular part. Okay, they will also turn out to be the same. So they have exactly same probabilities because e power plus I phi cancels out with e power minus I phi. Okay, so you'll get e power 0, which is 1. I hope that is clear, right? We are just taking complex conjugate, and that's why the probabilities turn out to be the same. All right. Now, because these are all correspond to the same energy level, what we can do is we can take a linear combination of these two functions, right? Of these two functions, we can take a linear combination. Okay. So if we take a linear combination of these two functions, we'll get a particular wave function which will also have the same energy as any of these individual functions, right? Because all of them have same energy. So even if you take linear combination of two wave functions which have same energy, again you'll get another wave function which has the same energy, right? So you're not doing anything different. So let's take linear combination. So there are two types of linear combination possible. One is we can add the two up, or other combination would be we subtract second from the first. Okay, so those are the two combinations. So let's see what happens if we add them up. So if we add them up and take the linear combination, then we do 1 by root 2 into, this is just your normalizing factor. So then you get y11 plus y1 minus 1. And this is proportional to, right, now we know what y11 and all is, right? So y11 is sine theta into e power I phi. y1 minus 1 is sine theta into e power minus I phi. Okay, so we can simplify it here, and e power I phi plus e power minus I phi is actually proportional to cos phi, right? So this p of x, or rather this linear combination, gives us sine theta cos phi. Sine theta cos phi is part of x, right? If you convert this into your Cartesian coordinates, you will see that this turns out to be x. Okay, so essentially this is your px orbital. Okay, that's why we denote it as px orbital, because it is, if you convert it back to Cartesian coordinates, you basically get x, right? Sine theta cos phi. So r sine theta cos phi is x. So r is already there in the radial part. So if you now take the full wave function, you will basically get px. Okay, so that's what you are getting here. Similarly, if you take the other linear combination, y11 minus y1 minus 1, right, you will get e power I phi minus e power minus I phi. And this is nothing but your sine theta, sorry, sine phi, right? So essentially you're getting sine theta, sine phi. And r sine theta, sine phi is nothing but your y in terms of Cartesian coordinates. So essentially this is nothing but your py orbital. Okay, so this is px and this is your py orbital. All right, so now you can just plot these. So px orbital will be along the x-axis, py orbital will be along the y-axis. Is this clear? Okay, so this is why we are writing it as px, py, and this is why the orbitals look the way that they look. Okay, so here I did not. Basically, these are just the wave functions. But here what I'm plotting are the probability densities. Okay, so please remember that distinction. We cannot, whenever we are looking at a wave function of a particle, The wave function itself does not have any physical meaning, but the probability density, right, the norm of the wave function, that has a physical meaning. Okay, so here always we are plotting the probability density. So there's these lobes, these represent the electron cloud, meaning the probability that there is a finite chance of the electron being in that position. Okay, that's what it represents. Any questions up to this point? All right. You can't hear my voice? Can all of you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, okay. Okay, okay. I think one of you has a problem with your audio. All right. Then we go to the next level, which is n equal to 3 level. Okay. So again, we look at the orbitals. So now for n equal to 3 level, wait, what have I done? All right. So for n equal to 3, L equal to 1, m equal to 0, right? You can again, for m equal to 0, you can again get the pz orbital, okay? Because it will turn out to be a function of just cos theta, and that is basically, if you convert it to Cartesian coordinates, that is just z, okay? And for L equal to 1, m equal to plus or minus 1, you can again do this type of linear combination, okay? Which is y11 plus y1 minus 1, and the other linear combination is y11 minus 1 minus y1 minus 1. Okay, so this is your px and this is your py orbital. Okay, so those are exactly the same, so I didn't go to it in detail. This is exactly the same as we did it here. Okay, because these are just your 3p, 3pz, 3px and 3py orbital. Okay, then we come to the next part, the d orbitals. Okay, so if you look at L equal to 2, m equal to 0 for n equal to 3 case, then this is what it turns out to be, r32 of r into y20, right, 20 of theta comma phi. So y20 of theta comma phi is your 3 into cos square theta minus 1, right? If you look at the table also, that is what we have, right? So y20 turns out to be 3 cos square theta minus 1. Okay, so that is the same thing. So that's why I had this table in the beginning. So you can go back to this table and refer whether everything is correct or not. Okay. All right. So where was I? Yeah. So 3 into cos square theta minus 1. So again, there is a cos square theta part. This is nothing but your z square part. Okay, so if you expand this function and write it down properly, you will get this as a function of z square, essentially. So this function, right, the probability density also is a function of z square. And so this particular orbital, right, this particular n value represents your dz square orbital. Okay, and so I've drawn this dz square orbital. This dz square orbital lies along the z axis. Okay, this you are already well aware of, but we are drawing it again here. All right. Then we have your n equal to 3, L equal to 2, m equal to plus or minus 1. So for the case of m equal to plus or minus 1, again we do linear combinations. Okay, so we'll do y21 plus y2 minus 1 and y21 minus y2 minus 1. So if we take the first linear combination, y21 plus y2 minus 1, this turns out to be proportional to sine theta cos theta into this part, which is e power I phi plus e power minus I phi, which comes from this addition. Okay. So e power plus I phi plus e power minus I phi, right? This is nothing but your cos phi. Okay. So instead of this, you are writing your cos phi. So this is sine theta, cos phi. So sine theta cos phi is nothing but your x, right? So r sine theta cos phi was your x and r cos theta is z. Okay. So basically the combination of this, and now if you take the square of it to get the probability density, you will get basically xz. Okay. So this particular superposition, linear combination, represents your dxz orbital, okay, which lies in the xz plane. Okay, so this is exactly that. All right. Then we will next do the other linear combination, which is y21 minus y2 minus 1. Okay, this gives you sine theta cos theta into e power I5 minus e power minus I5. So this term is nothing but your proportional to your sine theta, sorry, sine phi. Okay, so sine theta, sine phi is your y, and cos theta gives you z. Okay, so this particular combination, linear combination, gives you your dyz orbital. Okay, so this gives you dyz orbital. And so this these wave function or these cloud of electrons are in the yz plane. All right. Okay. So now you know what to do, right? So again, for m equal to plus or minus 2, again we will do a linear combination. Okay. So basically the linear combination will be y22 plus y2 minus 2. Okay, and this turns out to be sine square theta into e power 2i5 plus e power minus 2i5. Okay, and this turns out to be sine square theta into cos 2 phi. Cos 2 phi can again be written as cos square phi minus sine square phi, right? So essentially we are getting sine square theta cos square phi and sine square theta minus sine square theta sine square phi. So this is nothing but your x square minus y square orbital. Okay, so that's how you get it as x square minus y. So this x square minus y square orbital, these lie along x and y axis. Okay, so this is something. So my drawings are not very clear. If you guys can draw better, please do that. Okay, see if you guys can draw the orbitals better than me. Okay, but the main thing is that x square minus y square orbital lies along x and y axis. Okay, all right. And then the last final linear combination would be y22 minus y2 minus 2. And this is proportional to sine square theta into e power plus 2i5 minus e power minus 2i5. So this is nothing but your sine 2 phi. And sine 2 phi is nothing but your 2 sine phi cos phi. So again, you get your two components, product of two components, which is sine theta sine phi. And next is sine theta cos phi. So sine theta sine phi is y and sine theta cos phi is x. So this is nothing but your dxy orbital. And this lies in the xy plane. Okay. So this is how you get the orbital. This is how you get, the way the orbitals, turn out to be. Like when you represent it in Cartesian coordinates, how the orbitals look like, how the cloud of electrons look like, right? You get it from your, after solving the Schrodinger equation and after looking at the wave function and probability density, that is how you know that this is the way that the cloud of electrons can be plotted for these particular orbitals. Okay, so this was the important point. This is a very important part of this course. Okay, the whole course is aimed at understanding how these orbitals come into the picture. Okay, so again, let us, so this part is done. Now again, let us go back to the Zeeman effect. Any questions up to this part? Do you guys follow how we got all of these wave functions, right? And how we have plotted all of these. I've given you a specific idea because, plotting all of these things should actually be plotted in 3 dimensions. But plotting it in 3 dimensions is not going to be easy. So I've just given you an intuitive idea that why it is dyz, why it is dxz, right? That intuitive idea you have now got. Okay. Do you have any questions here? Let me see. Okay, fine. So next part is, let us go back again to Zeeman effect. What was Zeeman effect? The Zeeman effect is that under a magnetic field, the M levels basically become split up and they are non-degenerate now. Okay. So motion, so if there is a magnetic field, basically there has to be a magnetic dipole. Okay. So motion of an electric charge around a closed loop will produce a magnetic dipole mu. Okay. And the potential energy of that magnetic dipole in a magnetic field will be given as minus mu dot B. So B is your magnetic field, mu is your magnetic dipole. So the potential energy is given as U equal to minus mu dot B. So now when you want to find out what is the effect of this potential, on that electron, what you will do is you will add this potential energy to the Hamiltonian. Okay, that's what you are going to do. Okay, so your U in the Z, so this is your potential energy in all three directions, but the U in the Z direction, if the magnetic field is only in the Z direction, then it will turn out to be minus mu Z dZ. Okay, this is just Z directions of magnetic dipole, Z direction magnetic field. Okay, and the formula for this can be written in terms of the angular momentum in the Z direction, which is Lz. Okay, so this can be written as the angular momentum in the Z direction. You don't have to remember all these formulas, but just understand the concept, what is happening. So now this is your potential, which means that in your Hamiltonian, wherever that part is there, right, minus h cross square by 2m in del square plus v of v, right, plus v into psi. So that v part, wherever that part, you will put this particular potential. Okay, so your Hamiltonian for the hydrogen atom now will have this additional term. Okay, so that is why we needed this potential. So this is the H naught, this is without magnetic field, and then this represents the potential due to the magnetic field. And H naught is the same, okay? So I'm not changing H naught. H naught is the same big potential or the original Hamiltonian for the hydrogen atom, which is minus H cross square by 2 mu into del square. Okay, remember that this mu is different. This is the reduced mass, okay? And then you have this potential which goes as 1 by R. Okay, the Coulombic potential. So this is your H naught, and to this H naught we are adding one more potential which is due to the magnetic field. Okay, so this becomes your Hamiltonian, and then we solve for this. So what happens is we can reduce it to two equations, and finally we will get Lz into psi, which is m h cross psi, and H naught into psi will be this E by n square into psi. Okay, and so your total energy is a combination of these two energies. So the total energy turns out to be this part, which is nothing but your minus 13.6 electron volt by n square, right? That this is that part of the energy. And then there is an additional term, which is beta m dz. Okay, m represents your magnetic quantum number, right? So only variable that you have here is your magnetic quantum number, and Bz is the magnetic field in the z direction, and beta is a constant. And this beta constant is called Bohr magneton, and it has a particular value. So this is the value of the beta. Okay. So anyway, I'm not going to show you full calculation or anything, but just the main concept here is that in the Hamiltonian, there is an additional term. And therefore, when you solve for the energies, the energy also, the wave function remains the same, but in the energy also, there is an additional term. And this is the additional term which depends on the magnetic quantum number m. Okay. And now if you look at the energy levels, you will see that if there is initially there was a transition, let's say from 2p to 1s, there was only one spectral line. Okay, because there is just one transition. All these energy levels at the 2p level are the same. Okay, they are all at the same energy level. So there is just one transition from 2p to 1s. So there is just one line. Okay, but now if there is a magnetic field, then the three levels for the m values will be split into the three discrete levels, right? So these energy levels will become non-degenerate. And so now when you see, there will be three transitions from 2p to 1s. Okay, so when you look at the spectra, you will see that there are three lines. Okay. Now the three lines, there will not be much difference between the three lines. And that is because the gap between 2p to 1s is much more than the gap between, I should have drawn it in a better way, but the gap between this and this is much more than the gap between these individual levels amongst each other. Okay, so there will not be much gap or much difference between the three lines, but so essentially all three will be of almost equal energy. Okay, all three spectral lines will be of almost equal energy, but you will see three distinct separate lines. And in the case of no magnetic field, you will just see one single line in the spectrum. Okay, so this is the difference between the two. All right. So finally, one last thing before I end this lecture today. Okay, So we have so far seen energy of hydrogen atom. Okay, we have always looked at hydrogen atom, but we can do the same kind of approach. What approach I'm talking about? This approach. Basically, we can represent, we can again have this particular approach for hydrogen-like atoms also. What are hydrogen-like atoms? Hydrogen-like atoms are atoms which have one electron. They may have more number of protons, but they only have one electron. And what are such atoms? Such atoms are basically helium plus, Li2 plus, Be3 plus. Okay, so all of these are basically, they have lost some electrons, so that ultimately they have only one electron, but the number of protons are more. Okay, so the number of protons, that is the atomic number, is still 2, 3, 4, according to whatever the element is. So there is a slight change in the Coulombic potential. So in the Coulombic potential, you will have a Z, extra Z here, factor Z. Okay, so this is the Coulombic potential, and then everything else remains the same. And so if you solve for energy, finally you will get minus Z square into 13.6 electron volt by N square. Okay, so this is the energy of the hydrogen-like atoms. Okay, so everything else remains the same. All right, so I'll stop here. And do you have any questions?